Today it's this poem. Wish I had like a clippy sort of thing to, when I could tape it. Seems reasonable, maybe. Or paperclip. Potentially a better idea, right? Okay. Let's see. The issue is that this doesn't really... Ooh, I can clip it up here maybe. That's smart. Now we're using our brain. Clip up top. Look at that. I'm a genius. Now I don't have to use my hands so much to hold this in place, which is nice. And yeah, we will get on with this promptly. So, when Hugo Wolf went mad, I presume this is a person we'll be researching again. Last stream, we read The Life of Borodin, also by Bukowski, and spent quite a bit of the stream, or quite a bit of that part of the stream, researching Borodin to make sure we had context, so could very well do the same with Hugo Wolf here. So, Hugo Wolf went mad while eating an onion and writing his 253rd song, It Was Rainy. April and the worms came out of the ground, humming Tannhauser. He spilled his milk with his ink, and his blood fell out to the walls. Okay. And he howled and he roared and he screamed, and down his stairs his landlady said, "I knew it. That rotten son of a bitch had dummied up his brain. He's jacked off his last piece of music, and now I'll never get the rent, and someday he'll be famous. And they'll bury him in the rain. But right now, I wish he'd shut up that goddamn screaming. For my money, he's a silly pansy jackass. And when they move him out of here, I hope they move in a good, solid fisherman, or a hangman, or a seller of biblical tracts." Cool poem. Seems right off the face to continue very much Bukowski's sentiment of being very anti-artistic, or anti-artists. He continually seems to be writing about artists and their sort of folly and their maybe idiotic struggles with art and how destitute and worthless they are. Seems to be the Bukowski theme so far. I do hope we get into some more other things, but suppose it makes sense to start off your book with your opinions on what you are doing. Charles Bukowski. Should I fold this one? To a little... Where are you? There we go. Beanie. Should also get my shark. I wouldn't be a trans feminine Twitch streamer without the shark. This is Maria. get our pens out, do another reading without touching it, probably, and then follow that up with these different colors. I think one is pink, one is red, or is one orange? Are these different? I don't know. Okay. So, what was I saying? Something about being trans and having a shark. Her name is Maria. Right, we're going to maybe do a couple more readings of this. It's short, without any notes or comments, and then from there, I will probably think about starting to notate, as I like to, things that just stand out to me, questions, things I don't like, and things I do like. Kind of coming to have a color coding system, which is nice. So, when Hugo Wolf went mad. When Hugo Wolf went mad while eating an onion and writing his 253rd song, it was a rainy April and the worms came out of the ground humming Tannhauser. And he spilled his milk with his ink, and his blood fell out to the walls, and he howled and roared, and he screamed, and downstairs his landlady said, "I knew it, that rotten son of a bitch has dummied up his brain, he's jacked off his last piece of music, and now I'll never get the rent. And someday he'll be famous, and they'll bury him in the rain, but right now I wish he'd shut up that goddamn screaming. For my money, he's a silly pansy jackass, and when they move him out of here, I hope they move in a good, solid fisherman, or a hangman, or a seller of biblical tracts." Yeah. Short, simple. I might feel that this is less nuanced than the life of Borodin right off first glance, but read it one more time and then start notating. And I like reading it multiple times just to really listen to the poem before we start imposing our own ideas onto it. So that is indeed what I will do. The candle a little closer. Okay. This is a Jesus candle. So, when Hugo Wolf went mad. When Hugo Wolf went mad, Hugo Wolf went mad while eating an onion and writing his 253rd song. It was a rainy April, and the worms came out of the ground humming Tannhauser, and he spilled his milk with his ink, and his blood fell out to the walls, and he howled, and he roared, and he screamed, and downstairs his landlady said, "I knew it. That rotten son of a bitch has dummied up his brain. He's jacked off his last piece of music, and now I'll never get the rent. And someday he'll be famous. And they'll bury him in the rain. But right now, I wish he'd shut up that goddamn screaming. For my money, he's a silly pansy jackass, and when they move him out of here, I hope they move in a good solid fisherman. Or a hangman. Or a seller of biblical tracts. So, he went mad while eating an onion and writing his 253rd song. It was rainy April, and the worms came out of the ground humming Tannhauser, not familiar, and he spilled his milk with his ink, and his blood fell out to the walls, and he howled, and he roared, and he screamed, and downstairs his landlady said, "I knew it. That rotten son of a bitch has dummied up his brain. He's jacked off his last piece of music, and I'll never get the rent, and someday he'll be famous. And they'll bury him in the rain, but right now I wish he'd shut up that goddamn screaming for my money. He's a silly, pansy jackass, and when they move him out of here, I hope they move in a good, solid fisherman, or a hangman, or a seller of biblical tracts." So there is a few things I'm not familiar with. Tannhauser. Biblical tracts? I'm not sure what tract is referring to in this context. And then I don't know who Hugo Wolf is. But I don't need to know immediately, just to start looking at the actual writing. And then once words. Once we've dug more into the text, we can look at researching beyond it. So, mad while eating an onion and writing his 253rd song. I think eating an onion is a very, good way to show poverty. Right. Bukowski loves talking about these poor, starving artists, and as far as I know, no one has ever, historically, there's never been places where, raw onions will just be eaten out of, enjoyment. Culturally, obviously, some people like raw onions, but generally, I think that's a sign of poverty. So, I think that's a very, good way to express it in a very striking way. I think it's hard to write like that. Worms came out of the ground humming Tannhauser, and he spilled his milk with his ink. He spilled his milk with his ink, and his blood fell out to the walls. And he howled, and he roared, and he screamed, and downstairs. So, spilling his milk with his ink is very interesting. I'm not exactly sure what that is saying. And his blood fell out to the walls. Hello, Petra Anna Marie, yeah. Just passing by for support. Good luck with today's load of work, and don't forget to visit sometime too. Well, thank you. Petra is just fine. Yeah. Well, Petra, thank you for the follow. I appreciate you stopping by. Yeah. Oh, little little emotes. I love the Twitch emotes. They're so cute. Anyway, we're reading Bukowski. This is called "When Hugo the Wolf Went Mad." When Hugo Wolf went mad, and it's about starving artists. as most of Bukowski's things thus far, as I have read, seem to be. And hoping for some variety at some point in the future, but for now, we'll take this. Can we focus again? Come on. Focus. The autofocus is nice. There we go. But sometimes it gets a little buggy. Anyway. Carrying on. Artsy. Yeah. Candles. Poetry. Colors. So. He howled and he roared and he screamed, and downstairs his landlady said, I knew it! That rotten son of a bitch has dummied up his brain. He's jacked off his last piece of music, and now I'll never get the rent. So, this line is very impactful, right? Now I'll never get the rent, and someday he'll be famous. Good luck. Thank you. I appreciate it. Never get the rent, and someday he'll be famous. So, writing that they will never get the rent, which means he already wasn't paying rent, right? He was poor. And then someday he'll be famous. But this idea that life is sort of less important than the rent, I think is Bukowski's way of saying that the artist is worthless to society, probably. The artist is worthless societally, they don't pay their rent, they just eat onions and die, and then get famous. And I don't think that's an unreasonable assertion. I mean, it's kind of dumb, but Bukowski loves to talk about the starving artist, and this is that again. Someday he'll be famous is an interesting choice of line here. It's probably very kind of accurate, the posthumous fame that people achieve, and the fact that Bukowski is writing about him means he is. I believe Hugo Wolf is a name of some regard, but I'm just gonna check that if Hugo Wolf is actually like the person. Hugo Wolf, Austrian composer. Died at the age of 43. He wrote lieder and art songs. I should listen to him sometime. Final years. Left unfinished pages, right? Lost his mind completely. Now, he died in an asylum. So again, Bukowski is exaggerating these stories, which is fine. Right now we're going to take Bukowski sort of at his word. But let me add a note. So Hugo Wolf, Austrian composer. It makes sense. Writing his 253rd song. He wrote art songs, lieder. So very cool. And for those who don't know, Leader is it's usually a solo vocalist alongside piano, also called an art song. So soloistic vocal performance songs, but not like popular, like classical, right? A very famous German lead is Erlkönig, which is the something king. Erlkönig. Is that the elf king, maybe? Anyway, very intense piece of music. Highly recommend. That's by Schubert, I believe. Maybe Schumann. Maybe someone completely different, but very nice piece, Erlkönig. And then Humming Tannhauser, kind of recognize the name, probably just another composer. So he spilled his milk with his ink, and his blood fell out to the walls, and he howled, and he roared, and he screamed. So yes, he went mad. He dummied up his brain. I really like that line. Dummied up his brain. This is a little different from the previous ones, because this is implying that the art directly caused his insanity. Bukowski, understandable that he would say this. Do we think art drives people mad? I think so. I don't disagree with that idea. I think we talked about the artistic obsession before, the lack of balance in life and art, the way that art consumes your ability to care for others. And I don't disagree with the idea that art drives one mad. Art is an extremely powerful way to process the way you see the world and exaggerate the way you see the world. This is an exaggeration. So art is based on, art originates from feelings, essentially. Sort of joke about feelings on this channel a lot, but feelings, emotions, that is what creates art. Art takes whatever its subject is and exaggerates to hope, probably, to have some feedback with a person, exaggerate the feeling enough that the person can feel a lessened version of that, because they're never going to completely relate, but hope to approximate that as the artist. Now, this is really difficult for the artist because they happen to be exaggerating their suffering. The feeling is fairly fundamentally wrapped up in suffering. Some would say that it is entirely predicated on suffering. The Buddhists might say something like that. Perhaps. Adjusting my light a little bit. Up one. I have some backlight over there. Jesus candle went out. Tragic. It's really hard to light. Anyway. Petra. Hello. Listen, so the artist exaggerates emotions, and when emotions are so tied up in suffering, I think this is where we get our kind of concept of the tragic, tortured artist. All they can do is sit, look at their feelings, exaggerate them, and take examples of tragedy. This is once again a tragedy biography, like the last poem, right? Biographical tragedy. Except in both cases, we have Bukowski exaggerating the entire poem. This idea that he died not paying his landlord's money and she didn't care and hauled him out to replace him with someone worthwhile to society isn't correct. Because he didn't die in the apartment. Sure, he went to an insane asylum, but he didn't drop dead at his desk doing art. One might say that metaphorically, he did drop dead at his desk. Bukowski might assume that in his insanity there was still music in his head. I don't know. Regardless. And then he'll be famous. I'm guessing this feels very resentful, not just from the subject, but probably Bukowski as well. Because Bukowski suffers too, and at the time was probably not famous, and probably to some extent saw that maybe upon his death, and I don't know if he became really popular before his death, but regardless, Bukowski probably wondered if this was his path too. They'll bury him in the rain. We talked about the rain before. I don't think it's particularly meaningful as a metaphor as far as I can tell right off the bat. But right now I wish he'd shut up that goddamn screaming. Okay, so to me it looks like he's dead in this poem, mostly because I read blood fell out to the walls. But, and then it says jacked off his last piece. Yeah, bury him in the rain. So she sees him as dead. I do wonder, here's an idea, perhaps she sees him as already dead, even though he is still screaming. I'm just letting you know before I go, you followed and love the art on other social medias. I'll be looking forward to the next time. Thank you. I really appreciate that, Petra. That's awesome. I hope to see you back as well. Always love having people in chat. She sees him as already dead, which maybe is an indication to say that once one cannot produce, even in his lowly, maybe profession, quote unquote, as an artist, if he cannot produce, he is worthless and he is dead. Bye for now. Bye bye. Which makes any other worker, anyone who can contribute to society, more useful. The fisherman, the hangman, the seller of biblical tracts. What is a tract in the biblical tract? Okay, they're little pamphlets, which I would imagine, Bukowski does not see as a very valuable thing to society. Right? Someone selling biblical pamphlets is pretty maybe worthless to our cynical, I don't know Bukowski's religious inclination. I can't really see him being faithful. He was also a soldier. Interesting. So, he says that someone providing nothing, or maybe nothing real, or deception, and I'm assuming this is Bukowski's perception, is better than an artist. Maybe better than the deception of an artist. A hangman, someone who only takes lives. Someone who only takes lives is more valuable to society than someone who lives in squalor and makes incredible art and becomes famous. And this is to say that no matter how famous he becomes, no matter how much we increase the quality of art, the value will never increase. If we make a graph, the value of the artist will never increase. So, plus art, it looks like a T. Art quality on the x-axis, y-axis the artist value, and this assumes that even if he becomes famous, even if his work is great, it remains at the bare minimum. We'll say there is some inherent value to the artist as a human, which Bukowski might agree with. I'm not sure. But that is that. I'm gonna be right back. I need to go to the bathroom. Okay. I return. So we just talked about how no matter the amount, according to this poem, that an artist creates, that an artist produces, 253 songs. I mean, it is specifically mentioned in the poem. Numerical output. And composers who wrote art songs and lead seem to really write a lot, which is pretty wild. But no matter how much, no matter how beautiful, they're never going to be worth as much to society as a fisherman, a hangman, a seller of biblical tracts. Shut up that goddamn screaming. For my money, he's a silly pansy jackass. Like, this shows how uncaring the world is toward the artist. The artist who cannot pay. The artist who is not financially successful. And I'm not surprised. But this is so uncaring. I mean, the way it's described, a silly pansy jackass. He's a pansy. He could be working. He could be doing something worthwhile. But no. We would only care about someone going mad if they were a useful person to begin with. Is maybe what this poem says. The world is uncaring. To the lowly. And the artist. Now I am going to pull this up and just do a little more research on the life of our composer, Hugo Wolf. So, turn this down a little. I read it. How many liter did he write? 300 songs. Interesting that Bukowski said 253, but they probably just hadn't been, like, discovered. Second Viennese School. Ah, syphilis. That would be the composer's disease. It is actually historically, like, I think, Mozart had syphilis because composers were artists and they were having they were the ones doing all the hot sex that we do, all the gay stuff, and it's funny because we think of classical composers as these sophisticated people, but they were the famous artists, the sort of pop stars of their time. So yeah, syphilis, the composer's disease, as it is sometimes and often known. Child prodigy, failed everything except music. All he did was music. So this is not the same kind of story as Borodin. This isn't someone who devoted their life to art. His wife left him. Or girlfriend, I don't know. Prone to depression and mood swings, became despondent at the age of 21. His father didn't like him. Kapellmeister is chapel master. Choir lead. Neither the temperament, the conducting technique, nor the affinity for non-Wagnerian repertoire to be successful, and he returned to Vienna to teach and be poor. Zura, one of his best early works, Elegy for Wagner. So he really liked Wagner. Interesting. Makes sense. Known as Wild Wolf for his intensity, his expression. Rosé Quartet. Did not look at his quartet. Wow. So he's very divisive person, it seems. He matured into a very productive 2 years, turning point, published songs, incredible, dedicated passion, etc. And then he started to go crazy. He was exhausted, he had syphilis from his career as a composer. Stopped composing. He kept getting more famous, but he wasn't writing anything new, he wasn't teaching. Hello, I can't totally see it from here. Something to... Hi, thank you for following. I appreciate it. Means a lot. I'm currently doing some research on Hugo Wolf because... Okay. There it is. MM2... Okay. MT Juke. Okay. Well, welcome. I'm glad to have you here. I'm researching Hugo Wolf because we're reading Charles Bukowski and analyzing, and Bukowski has a poem about him. Hugo Wolf was a composer, very passionate but also very depressed, died of syphilis and going insane because he was a composer. Could make no music by 1899, was insane, tried to drown himself, 60 pages of an unfinished opera. Am I trans? I am trans. That is me. I trans femme, tend to use any pronouns. I don't really care about the whole binary stuff. Your sister is in the process of transition. Very cool. Well, if you have any questions, into a boy. Okay. So, your brother, perhaps? I don't know, maybe they are not there yet, but if you have any questions about trans stuff and how to deal with that, I'm happy to talk, and also you can just sit here and enjoy the art and all of that. So, now there's more details about his music, but I don't think there's much more that I need to know about Hugo Wolf. other than he was a passionate artist, the tortured type, and attempted to self-end. Yeah, brother, and maybe they will follow me. Yeah, that'd be really cool. I think my chat has a lot of trans people. They tend to show up, and I think that's a really nice thing to do for your sibling, to point them toward my channel if it seems like something they would like. So I think that's actually a really sweet gesture of you toward them, and I think he, if he's at that point in the transition of using that pronoun, would appreciate that greatly. I think that's very sweet. Having people being supportive of your family in their sort of queer existence is really, really amazing and important, so, like, good on you. Hello, Nashi. I'm always happy to have you here. Always, as in it's been like the second time, but, you know. We are reading more Bukowski by the candlelight, and this poem just is mostly about, again, the tortured artist, and Hugo Wolf, who is an Austrian classical composer. He went insane after a very prolific career, I would say. A very prolific part of his career, went insane, basically wrote himself to death, maybe. And Bukowski sort of dramatizes this story as Hugo Wolf being in this apartment, collapsing, screaming, and his landlord pitying him as he dies because he dummied up his brain, and they will never get the rent because of that, and calling him a silly, pansy jackass. So this poem really is just Bukowski again saying that artists are societally worthless, which he didn't technically say as overtly before, but this is to say the artist has no monetary value to the world. The artist, or at least that the world sees the artist as not having monetary value. Bukowski might not agree. This might be more looking through the lens of the societal perception. I can't be sure. I try not to speak for Bukowski too much, but he also is very, I would say, clear in his thoughts on things, especially when he writes things like As the Sparrow, which is, you know, autobiographical, talking about his daughter, presumably, if it wants to focus. It's having some trouble today. As the Sparrow talks about his dear child, how worthless he is, how he will never offer anything, and this poem, the tension between work, productivity, and art. So, Bukowski book is starting to get very colorful, and it's very nice. I think that is all of the Bukowski for today. That's a good amount of Bukowski. Which means I'm on to something else.